Hello, welcome to A Way Forward. My name is Maria. I'm the host of A Way Forward, and I'm excited to have our second season. Dr. Michael Rich is a pediatrician at the Boston Children's Hospital. He's an associate professor at Harvard Medical School. He's the director of the Digital Wellness Lab, and he's also the director at the Clinic for the Interactive Media and Internet Disorders. Thank you for joining me. I'm excited to dig deep, and welcome to the space.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
So, one of the things that we don't see a lot in conversation is digging deep in a way where we can take complex things and make them very, very simple. So I know that I said a lot of fancy words. I want you to describe to me in simple words what internet disorders mean to you.
Internet disorders or interactive media disorders are basically disorders that occur in the interactive media space, essentially online. A lot of people use social media as a broad strokes look at this, but it's actually a situation where now all media are essentially social. We are sharing them all the time. Everybody's definition for social media is different. So I take a step back and say that basically any screen-based interactive form is interactive media, whether it be games or social media as we traditionally know it, or texting or communication, and even into realms that are kind of scary and weird, like pornography and hate sites and the dark web.
It's a wide category that you include. Do you include the screen time that kids are on even during school? As that could be included? Okay.
Absolutely. In fact, I think we have to pay attention to the fact that kids are now, in many cases, using 2 or more screens simultaneously. They are watching Netflix and texting each other live or FaceTiming each other live. And I think that one of the things that we really have to think about now is that screen time, as we originally conceived of it, is an obsolete concept. We developed this concept of how much screen time is okay or not in the era of television, when we would sit down and watch a program from beginning to end and we know exactly what was going on, and when it would end. Now, we basically live in a seamless digital physical world, and we are moving in and out of them simultaneously and constantly. We have screens in our pockets, on our every wall, on our wrists, and we don't use screens the way we did in the era where television was the only screen we had. And so I think that what we need to do now is essentially turn that screen time limit paradigm on its head and say, we are using screens almost constantly. What we need to concentrate on is our intentional non-use of screens, our intentional times of turning them off, putting them down, and being face-to-face with other human beings, with being physical out in the natural world, and where we really need to bring back boredom.
You explained where these disorders come from and what is the broad category for use of screen time. But what brings me to this conversation here as a parent and as someone watching the new generation of kids growing up that are surrounded by screens in every aspect of their life. Boredom is not there. Childhood is not comparable to what it was before. Social personality development is changing. So when we talk about what these disorders are and what psychiatric journals are indicating as a nexus between social media and screens and social anxiety disorders, can you actually name the disorders that you see that are connected to a overconsumption of social media and screen time?
Certainly. And in fact, we actually look at what's going on for those kids who are actually impaired due to their screen use as a broad category of problematic interactive media use. And the reason I say that is that what we have discovered is that this is not due to a specific technology, a specific type of device, specific platform, so much as it is the interactivity of the online space that draws them in, immerses them, and has them lose track of time and place. So in many ways, the issue with screen time as it exists today is what they are not doing because they're on a screen. They are not sleeping enough. They are not doing their homework. They are not having family meals with their siblings and parents without devices where they can download from the day's events and they can reset themselves. That's the single most positive thing we can do, most protective thing we can do for our kids' mental health as well as their nutrition, is sit down and have a meal together without devices. And so what we see is that there is a lot of overlap between what we would think of as a gaming problem and a social media issue or a smartphone issue or a pornography issue, because it's all so fluid between them. And so we take a step back and actually are seeing these issues not actually as diagnoses in the traditional sense, but as a syndrome of underlying diagnoses that are driving this. And what I mean by that is that these kids, in every case we've seen that have come to our clinic, have had one or more of 4 broad areas of psychological distress. And usually it's more than one. And those are attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, social anxiety, or more broadly, anxiety disorders, autism spectrum disorder, and depression. Now, there's a lot of talk right now about the online space or social media causing anxiety and depression. What we're actually seeing is that anxiety and depression draw them to this space, which then accelerates and amplifies the problem, but does not necessarily cause it.
Okay, this is very, very key. Very, very key what you just stated. So if we look at the role that a family can play to be able to intervene at times where kids could develop disorders or increase their chances of having a heightened case of that disorder, where they could intervene is looking at their behavior before they interact with media, right? And what your family setup looks like. Is there a lot of alone time on the sofa, just staring at a screen and scrolling? Is the child saying, nah, I don't want to go for a walk. I don't want to go to the park. It's not as fun as me sitting here in front of a game. So all of those things get heightened if you don't intervene as a family member. So those are solutions. And I appreciate that you said that it's not necessarily that the technology creates those disorders, but it adds to the behavior that's already a pattern that's problematic. And so that gives us space to have a better relationship with technology as not the ultimate source, but something that needs to be managed. But let me just ask you this. Behaviors that are put in as your daily life for a child start very early. You're introduced to the park very early, introduced to the family time very early, routine very early. What are you seeing as the early stage of intervention that parents have to say, okay, our child is born now. Now he or she will be a consumer to digital media companies. How do we set the boundaries? And my child is 7 months old. What would you say to that family?
Well, I would actually say that instead of waiting for a problem and intervening on it, let's prevent as much as possible. One of the things I talk about with parents, actually from the moment the child is born, I don't even wait until 7 months, is let's think about what I call the 5 M's of digital wellness. The first M is for the parents themselves to model the behavior they want to see in their kids. Don't be staring at your smartphone for that all-important email after hours while yelling at your kid to turn off Grand Theft Auto. To them, that's the height of hypocrisy. So we need to be the change we want to see in our kids. We want to be the behaviors we want to see in our kids. The second is actually we have to approach these devices and these platforms and this whole digital ecosystem not as a treat or as something to be bestowed upon them for straight A's or taken away if for punching your sister, but as power tools, as the powerful tools they are. The smartphones in our pockets are over 1 million times more powerful than the computer that landed Apollo 11 on the moon. It is full of power to do amazing things. These kids have the opportunity to grow up in a world where they can, in their classroom, be at the top of Mount Everest or in the depths of the Mariana Trench, or in another culture, speaking another language or relating to another type of person in another culture. And yet, that also is hugely distractive if it's not used in purposeful, focused ways. So when we believe that our child is ready for and needs this power tool, whether it be a smartphone or a social media platform, we need to mentor them in its use. What I mean by mentoring them is not teaching them, which is thought of as a one-way transfer of information, but as learning it together. One of the things parents tell me is that they dread the internet talk more than the sex talk, because correctly or incorrectly, they think they know something about sex, but they are certain their kid knows more about the internet than they do. And so mentoring is a process where the mentor learns as much from the mentee as the mentee does from the mentor. So sit down next to your child with that smartphone and learn it together. Approach it with curiosity and interest and telling them, I love you, I respect you, I want to understand what engages you here, and I want to learn from you. And you start a dialogue around using this device or this platform that then extends into the third M, which is to be able to monitor their digital lives.
You've built a relationship is what you're saying. The relationship is there, and there's a lot that you don't know, so the child understands that, and now you're partners. Your partner.
Exactly. And you're
Third
learning
M.
it together, and you're venturing into this digital ecosystem together. And when I say monitor, which is the thing that parents and kids both push back against the hardest, the kids, I want my privacy, even though to a 13-year-old privacy means only so mom and dad can't see. They're oblivious to the millions of people out there who have less good intentions for them than their parents. But to have their usernames and passwords, not to spy on them, because the parents' pushback is, I don't have the time to be gaming all the time he's gaming or on social media all the time she is, but to be able to. Because just like random drug testing in the workplace changes workers' behaviors when they're not at work, the same thing happens with kids. Their behavior is different because they know you can know what they're doing. And it actually is comforting to them because they realize then that when they come across a site that upsets them, confuses them, weirds them out, pornography or whatever, and the average age of coming on a pornography site now is 9. So that means even younger kids are getting on it. And we need to be able to talk about that stuff with them. They need to be able to come to us, not feel that they have done something bad and need to hide it from us, but they need to share it with us, and they can share it with us. And we can help them navigate what is, frankly, a very complex and full of pitfalls digital ecosystem. So model, mentor, and monitor. Those are the 3 things we can do. And then there are 2 M's that are goodies that come from it. The first one is they achieve mastery of this environment, that they know that they can use it in purposeful, focused ways to learn, to connect, to communicate. But they also know what it doesn't do well, and they can turn it off and put it away, because then they can achieve the final and best of all the M's, which is to make memories. We don't make memories of the video games we play or the social media exchanges, except when they go really bad. But we make memories of, kicking a soccer ball around the backyard, or watching ants build an anthill, or taking a walk with grandpa in the woods. Or even trying to cook a meal and spilling the spaghetti sauce all over.
Yeah, I agree. Those are moments that are actually, they're being, childhood is being robbed out of those moments, right? That's how I see it. If you see the heightening or the increase of these disorders, you mentioned depression, right? There's social anxiety, I know. There's different forms of isolation that occur when you're alone. And so much content that you're bringing in. And we'll get into that a little bit as far as why this content is being pushed onto the kids. It's a different conversation, but I want to have it with you. Statistically, are you able to see then those increases in the last 4 or 5 years? I know that you said the age of 9 is what we're looking at for coming across pornography on the internet. But what about the increase of these disorders? Statistically, have they increased in the last 5 years?
I think that they have increased over time, more than 5 years. We've actually been taking care of kids who've struggled with their interactive media use for probably 15 years. Remember, the smartphone was introduced in 2007. They have made it much more accessible because they're mobile, because they're carryable. They can be anywhere. And so instead of being stuck behind a computer or a television set,
Right.
basically people are exposed all the time. So in that case, in that sense, they have increased. I think though that the underlying anxiety and depression have increased over a much longer period of time. What these devices and these platforms have done is to make it obvious, amplify it, and
amplify it. Now let's talk about why we're here. Okay. Now I come from a policy background, and so I'm interested in solving these issues through policy and legislation and mandates, but also having these conversations so we can empower ourselves as individuals and family members, because you're not going to get solutions through Congress all the time. So let's talk about the role of tech companies and digital media strategies to keep our children in tech, okay, and focused. You mentioned distractions from your own life. You mentioned disorders that I have seen coming up are isolation and depression, or even body dysphoria, content that basically tells you you're not enough, you don't have enough, right? So there's consumer-driven industries that are using these tech tools as well, and creating this really emptiness and void in a lot of individuals because you're a pediatrician. And as a pediatrician, as someone who's trying to solve these problems, do you see yourself as an ally that could solve these problems with digital media companies? Or do you see yourself as someone who's pushing back in a system that's very profit-driven, that has put our children in these situations and I am going to get into the positive aspect. Don't worry, I will get into that. But I think we need to really deconstruct the negative and the investment that is put into distracting our kids through digital media.
I am both. And the central concept behind the Digital Wellness Lab is the concept that we are all in this together. Those tech company execs have children too. And one of the perhaps apocryphal myths is they don't let their kids have these devices. They don't let their kids go on. They send their kids to Waldorf schools with no screens, et cetera. That's not entirely true, but I think that also being in direct conflict with them, being fearful of them, feeling guilty about what we've done to our kids and rewiring them doesn't help either. And so one of the perhaps contrarian ideas of the Digital Wellness Lab is, let's work with the companies as much as they will work with us. Let us bring our research to them and to consumers simultaneously, and let consumers decide whether the companies are giving their children and them what is healthy for them. Let's not go to the situation where the tech companies become like the tobacco companies, where they are ignoring the potential harms and they are losing customers, users because of that. Let's bring them to the table. And in fact, one of the things that we proposed, actually advised by youth, is that 2 years ago, at the Cannes Lions Festival, which is the equivalent of the Cannes Film Festival, but for advertisers and consumer products companies, we challenged the industry to the Inspired Internet Pledge, which you can go to at inspiredinternet.org.
Okay.
And it is a 3-point aspirational pledge. First, to tune their products for emotional wellness. The second is to listen and respond to those who have encountered harm. And the third is to share information among themselves, not necessarily competitive information, but information about what is best for their users. So we are trying to create for them a second bottom line of the wellness of their users. And when we propose this as inspired by the kids, everybody says, "You're nuts." We have over 30 signatories to this, including big ones like TikTok and Pinterest.
Okay. Great.
And Pinterest has been a real leader in this, and realizing that if they can take care of their users will continue to come to them and enrich their platform as opposed to being fearful or guarded or restrictive about it.
This is so exciting because there is such a block as far as advocacy groups understanding that there are tech companies on the other side that are willing to listen and understanding this, because we understand there has to be a second bottom line, and people are waking up to the fact that if I'm going to interact with technology but it's harming me, it's not going to work. I'd rather leave, but I'm addicted. So there has to be this partnership between the consumer and the tech company. So I'm so thankful that your digital wellness lab did that, and I'm so excited that you're getting positive feedback. I know that in New Zealand and Iceland, they both had actually very powerful mandates. I believe, not New Zealand, Australia. Australia has, yes, they have limited social media, I believe, till the age of 16. And in Iceland, they banned pornography, actually, completely, not because of any religious reason, but for the fact that they didn't think it was good for their everyday life. And so there have been governments that have taken on this very, very assertively. And I think what you're describing is a middle ground, a partnership between tech companies and advocacy groups and physicians, groups that can understand that fine balance. I do want to speak about the way you speak to children. This is a little bit different. I know you speak to children about parents about distraction and the 3 M's. I love that. And then the 2 other M's that you gave as treats. But it must come up when you have to speak to children about some of the dark stuff that they've seen because of the bad actors that have come forth and are using advertising. I mean, I've seen this in games for young kids, specifically boys. I've seen that they're just snaps or images of advertising that comes in that have nothing to do with the game, but it's a way to lead them into a very dark space that affects them personally. Do you ever find yourself in a position where you have to talk to children or tell parents what words to use when their kids have seen something? I know you touched on it a little bit, but what are the best words to use?
I'm constantly in that situation, quite honestly.
Yeah.
And the best words to use are honest words. Honest about what is out there, honest about how it affects us all, honest about the fact that it affects us as adults as much as it does as kids, although they are much more vulnerable to those effects. I think that it's really important to share this experience, to realize that we're all in this digital ecosystem together and we're all solving the problems together. And one of the reasons why I work with the tech companies is, they're the ones who are going to change this environment. It may change only because they're beaten over the head by legislation, but the reality is, as you know, legislation is too slow. It is too slow, and it is a compromise, always between 2 warring sides. And I'm saying, let's all get on the same side of the table. Let's sit around this table, roll up our sleeves, and bring our respective skill sets to bear on solving the problem that we all share. We need to be able to look at each other in real time, in real space, and be together as fellow humans. And so I say this quite simply to the parents: instead of saying, turn that off, say, let's do something else. Like for kids who are big into action video games, I say, take up parkour, yeah, you can
Oh, I
break your
love this.
arm. You can break your arm in it, but you know what? It is easier for me as a physician to fix a broken arm than it is to fix a broken spirit. And
Mhm.
part of what
Wow.
draws these kids to the games is they're kind of subversive.
I loved what you just said about I can fix a broken arm easier than I can fix a broken spirit. And I think that is such a powerful takeaway from this conversation. Does the digital media that your children are consuming, that even you are consuming as an individual, not just children, is it harming your spirit? Is it robbing your spirit from the positivity that it can have and then who you're going to be in this world, right? And I know that you wrote a book that kind of breaks down and does more of a deep dive. Can you share the title of your book?
There you go.
Amazing.
The Mediatrician's Guide, a joyful approach to raising healthy, smart, kind kids in a screen-saturated world. And I want to tell you a story about the image on the front of it. This image of a child, I'll hold it up, is actually a photo mosaic of over 600 selfies of kids.
That's incredible. Oh,
Yeah.
what an amazing, amazing thing to do.
It's a visual metaphor for what the book is
Yeah.
about, which is for all of us, for all of our kids. We are all learning to live in this new ecosystem together. And the issue ultimately is that parenting and loving your children and raising your children well hasn't changed. What has changed is the environment in which it's occurring. And we need to learn that environment. We need to master that environment. And we need to help our kids lean into that environment rather than be fearful of it and block it off, because they will always develop a workaround if we create it as the forbidden fruit.
There's been so much in this conversation, and I'm just so grateful that you came and you had this conversation with me. How do you feel that we can move forward in amplifying the word kind through digital media and being able to minimize the amount of souls and spirits that are impacted that are hurt by digital media? That's my question to you.
The way we should approach it is not to develop hot takes, but warm takes. In other words, let's remember that we love each other. Let's remember that we care about these children. We want them to be happy and successful, but we also want them to be able to find their own way. And so I consider myself an optimistic pragmatist. The optimist in me looks at the children and sees their intense desire to be well, to be okay, not just in a physical sense, but in an emotional and a social and a psychological sense as well. They do want this. And yet the dark side is very attractive, is dystopian views are very attractive to them. And we have to acknowledge that they are attractive to us too, and step into the valley of the shadow of death together and say, okay, we're going to deal with this and we're going to understand why we want to protect ourselves and each other in this space. The pragmatist in me says, I can't wait for Congress to figure it out and get it together. And I realize that they'll get to there 5 years from now, and it will be a compromise that would have been okay for now, but we'll have moved 5 years. And I need to deal with the young people and their parents that are in front of me right now. We need to deal in an imperfect way with this imperfect world. We have to acknowledge that parenting is more of an art than a science, but it can be guided by science, and that we are going to make mistakes. And the kids are actually pretty resilient, especially if they know they are loved and that they can come to you with everything.
Beautiful, Dr. Rich. And I think, the interdependence of all that we are and all the different personalities that we are, and the fact that we can use technology as a way where we can connect is a beautiful, beautiful way to be and to result in kindness. And fill those vacuums that we have in our family spaces and our personal spaces with kindness, so our spirits are not harmed. So I really, really appreciated this conversation, but I want to thank you specifically because you were ahead of the curve, actually. And I think that you identified the impact of media before it became so clear to everybody else. And I want to thank you for following your gut on that and taking on a space that was fairly unknown of how to handle and making it personal for children and families, because I think we're only going to be able to solve this by embracing the fact that we have the power to be able to make those changes ourselves together.
Right.
So
Together.
thank you so much, Dr. Rich, and thank you for your time. And I'm excited to move in a way forward with this.
And to quote the title of the last chapter of my book, yes, you can.
Yes, we can. Yes,
exactly.
we can. Thank you.
Be well.